we usually think of high awareness as a rare and valuable psychological gift. But for many people, it feels more like a brain stuck in permanent high definition. You notice a subtle shift in a friend's voice while hearing every distant background noise. Cognitive psychology suggests this processing style treats every tiny detail as equally crucial information. While others simply exist in a room, you are busy decoding the entire social environment. This relentless mental intake leads to a specific type of burnout called cognitive overload. It feels like having dozens of browser tabs open in your mind that never close. You look perfectly calm on the outside, but your internal system is running at max capacity. By mid-afternoon, you feel completely drained even if you haven't been physically active at all. Most people have a mental filter for background signals, but yours is often wide open. You aren't just tired from your daily tasks, you are tired from the act of perceiving. This is a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that a standard night of sleep rarely seems to fix. You might find yourself needing total silence just to recover from a basic social interaction. The very trait that makes you so insightful is also the one draining your battery. To understand this constant fatigue, we have to look at the missing filter in the brain. Why does the world often feel like a physical weight on your shoulders? While most people move through life unfazed, your brain is busy tracking every single detail. Psychology calls this trait sensory processing sensitivity, and it is actually rooted in your biology. Deep inside your brain, a small region called the thalamus acts like a literal gatekeeper. Its primary job is to filter out the noise so you can focus on what matters. For most people, this gate effortlessly blocks out things like the hum of a refrigerator. But for highly aware people, this biological filter is much more porous and leaky. Instead of standing strong, the gate stays open and lets almost every detail through. Imagine trying to work while someone is constantly whispering random facts into your ear. This is exactly why a simple trip to the grocery store can feel so overwhelming. You can't help but notice the flickering lights and the distant rattle of shopping carts. You even pick up on the cashier's mood or the faint scent of soap from another aisle. Because your brain fails to filter these inputs, it treats every single one as urgent information. You are using massive amounts of cognitive energy just to exist in a public space. While your friends are relaxing, your mind is performing a high-speed analysis of everything around you. It is like trying to run a high-definition processor on a standard-sized battery. Your internal system starts to shut down by midday simply because of the data volume. This is why you often feel a desperate need to retreat into a dark, quiet room. This constant sensory intake is the real reason you feel so drained by the afternoon. Your awareness is a superpower, but it is one that costs a significant amount of energy. You walk into a crowded party and immediately feel a strange, heavy tension in the air. While others see a simple gathering, you see a complex web of hidden emotional signals. Psychology calls this high-level social monitoring, and for you, it happens completely automatically. Your mind is constantly tracking microexpressions, which are tiny, lightning-fast movements of the face. You don't just hear their words, you hear the subtle shifts in their breathing and tone. Imagine being in a meeting and noticing a coworker's jaw tight for just a fraction of a second. You instantly know they are upset, even if they keep using a calm and professional voice. This level of hyper-awareness forces your brain to constantly update its mental map of the room. Research suggests this deep processing burns through your mental energy and glucose reserves much faster. It's like running an intensive background program that never stops scanning for signs of social friction. This leads to a state called anticipatory exhaustion, where you feel drained before you even arrive. You've likely spent the whole morning mentally rehearsing every possible interaction and reaction from the group. Because you are working so hard to read everyone, socializing starts to feel like a job. You aren't being antisocial. You are simply managing a much higher volume of social data than others. By the time you get home, the silence is the only place where you can finally breathe. Yet even in that quiet room, the emotional echoes of the day often continue to linger. Recognizing this high-fidelity perception is the first step toward finally learning how to protect your battery. It isn't just the bright lights or the loud noise that eventually wear you down. There is an invisible emotional weight that comes from every person you encounter. Psychology calls this emotional contagion. It's the automatic process of absorbing the feelings and moods of those around you. If you are highly aware, this happens instantly without any conscious filter. You might walk into a quiet office and immediately feel the unspoken tension. You could be having a great morning until you sit next to a stressed-out friend. Within minutes, your heart rate starts to climb and your own mood begins to sink. Research suggests that sensitive people often have more active mirror neurons in their brains. These cells help you empathize, but they also blur the line between your feelings and theirs. You start to struggle with separating your own stress from the tension of a total stranger. This leads to a deep exhaustion called empathy distress, where your system simply becomes overloaded. You aren't just managing your own life, you're carrying the emotional baggage of the entire room. You might leave a party early, not because you're bored, but because your capacity is full. The result is a frequent, desperate need for total isolation just to reset your internal baseline. You have to pull away just to figure out which emotions actually belong to you. This is a heavy, invisible tax on your energy that most people never have to pay. Being an emotional sponge is a noble trait, but it's also a direct recipe for burnout. However, this emotional intake is only one part of why your mind feels so crowded. You might realize hours later that you've been mentally replaying a 5-minute interaction. This isn't just overthinking, it's your brain's drive to find a deeper pattern in everything. Psychology calls this the need for closure, which is simply the brain's craving for a definite answer. It is the urge to find a clear explanation for every subtle social cue you notice. For you, there is rarely such a thing as a neutral comment or a random glance. When a friend forgets to text back, you don't just see a busy schedule. You see a potential shift in the friendship or a sign of some hidden tension. Your mind treats every interaction like a complex puzzle that must be solved right now. It scans for patterns to make sure you are safe and socially aligned with others. This trait makes you incredibly insightful, but it also carries a heavy mental tax. Constantly searching for subtext creates what experts call cognitive overhead. This is the extra energy your brain burns to process the why behind the what. You spend your day solving puzzles that other people don't even know exist. Eventually, this relentless analysis leaves your internal battery completely empty. It is hard to simply exist when you are always busy deciphering your surroundings. You might wonder why you can't just take things at face value like everyone else. But for a highly aware mind, the surface level of a conversation is never enough. Living in the subtext is like working a second shift in every social situation. This constant vigilance is exhausting, yet it feels like an inseparable part of your identity. However, there is a vital difference between being aware and being on high alert. Awareness becomes exhausting when it shifts from simple observation into a survival tactic. You might think you're just being observant, but your brain is actually scanning for threats. Psychology calls this hyper-vigilance, an elevated state of alertness used for protection. When you are overwhelmed by data, your mind starts treating every detail as a danger. This is very different from healthy awareness, which simply notices the present moment. True awareness feels light and open, whereas hypervigilance feels rigid and heavy. Imagine you are walking into a busy office or a crowded restaurant. A healthy observer might notice the decor without feeling personally drained by it. If you're hypervigilant, you're subconsciously tracking every voice and the position of every door. You're trying to predict problems before they happen to avoid being overwhelmed. This state keeps your amygdala, the brain's alarm center, active even when you are safe. Because the alarm is always ringing, your body never gets the signal to truly relax. This constant red alert keeps your nervous system locked in a high-stress mode. Over time, this mental monitoring drains your energy as much as physical labor would. You often need hours of isolation just to bring your system back to a calm baseline. You aren't just tired from what you did, you're tired from everything you tracked. Understanding this difference is the first step toward lowering your guard without losing your insight. High awareness can often feel like an uninvited guest that simply refuses to leave the room. You might start to believe this sensitivity is a character defect you need to repair or hide. But psychology suggests viewing your perception as a high-performance system rather than a broken filter. A high-fidelity mind takes in much more data, which requires a lot more power to process. You can manage this drain by practicing what psychologists call intentional cognitive gating. This is basically the conscious act of deciding which information gets to use your limited energy. In practice, it might mean using noise-canceling headphones when the physical world gets too loud. It also means noticing someone else's mood shift without feeling an immediate obligation to fix it. You aren't being cold or distant, you're just closing the gate to protect your internal battery. Research shows that scheduled periods of silence are a physical necessity for people like you. Giving yourself permission to withdraw periodically helps prevent your nervous system from burning out. When you stop treating every signal as a top priority, that heavy exhaustion finally starts to lift. You can eventually enjoy the beauty of the world without being crushed by the weight of it. Your awareness becomes a tool you choose to use, rather than a burden you can't escape. You have every right to be both deeply observant and deeply rested at the same time. Ultimately, your gift doesn't have to be a burden if you learn how to use the off switch.